I worked on a border kibbutz in Israel in 1976. A group of 50 of us flew from the U.S. and landed in Tel Aviv to begin our work as volunteers. A bus picked us up and delivered us to 3 kibbutzim, all located just a few kilometers south of the Sea of Galilee, bordering the country of Jordan. I remember how excited we were to arrive and get settled in. In this picture, we are standing at sea level, looking down to the Sea of Galilee far below in the Jordan Valley. If you swing the camera slightly to the right, you will see our kibbutz in the distance. Barbed wire, a minefield, and the Yarmouk River separated us from Jordan, through which terrorists would occasionally come. The Israelis would drag an iron grate each evening next to the minefield and check for footprints every morning to see if anyone had come over in the evening. There were guard dogs about every 30 yards on the perimeter of the residential area. A captured T-34 tank was embedded at the kibbutz entrance nearest Jordan. Its main gun and turret were kept oiled and ready to be used for defense if terrorists were to try to penetrate the perimeter. Here you can see it up close. That's my dormitory where we lived and slept. My roommates were Bill and Don. Bill later became a Supreme Court judge in Arizona, and Don became a pastor of a church in Indianapolis. I can tell you that we were all set to have a very educational summer. Here I am doing my laundry. Just a few feet away from our dorm was the telephone operator building and the laundry room. Its roof was topped by a 1-foot thick slab of concrete and rebar to protect against any incoming terrorist rockets. The modern dining room, where 500 people could eat in one sitting, was air-conditioned, and its roof was 1 meter thick of concrete and rebar, with a bomb shelter in the basement that could hold all of the kibbutz. On high security days, a submachine gun would be placed under each table of about 6 people to use if any terrorists decided to come uninvited to dinner. Around the outside corner of our beautiful swimming pool ran a defensive trench, all ready for use at a moment's notice. A guard tower was just behind. This land, as well as much of it in Israel, had been bought by Jews through the decades. Some Arabs tended to have a cyclical mentality regarding land ownership. So if one's great-grandfather had sold the land before they were born, then they weren't in agreement with the sale. Then it must still be their land. Our kibbutz land had been bought in the 1950s by none other than Mr. Jimmy de Rothschild himself, of Rothschild banking fame. He also donated millions toward the building of the Knesset building in Jerusalem. Through years of sweat and hard work, the useless malarial swamp had been reclaimed by many Latvian Jews and was now producing some of the finest fruit for export to Europe. Each morning we boarded the work wagon at 4 a.m. sharp for the short ride to the vineyards or banana fields. What amazed us is that each vineyard was also used to experiment in various methods to increase table grape yield. We were reminded each morning of a sacrifice of those who went before us as we solemnly passed a work wagon that had been blown up with an IED, killing kibbutz members and volunteers alike. Now the roads were paved to prevent the planting of IEDs in the roadway. Yes, the once barren land was now blooming on every side. I was told that our kibbutz had 26 tractors in total, but despite all the progress, we were constantly reminded of where we were, with the presence of bomb shelters maintained and ready. On the outside theater wall was a large mural depicting kibbutz life. Kibbutz life was made up of 3 things: work, family, and culture. When we weren't working in the fields, there was also other work to be done with the chickens, the dairy cows, the plastic factory that made bottles for Revlon makeup, and orange juice bottles. One day a week, the kibbutz would take us on an all-expense-paid tour of Israel in their truck that was converted into a bus. It was pretty rough, but it was so educational. By the end of the summer, we had seen everything from Caesarea to the Golan Heights to Jericho and a lot in between. I even got a picture of Yitzhak Rabin on the neighboring kibbutz pausing to look into my camera lens. Years later, he would be assassinated. By far the most intriguing part of kibbutz life was the children of the kibbutz. Instead of living at home, they had their own miniature dormitories on the kibbutz campus. That way both their mother and father could work full-time unhindered. Once a baby was ready to drink from a bottle, he or she would move into a nursery or dormitory that had little chairs and tables and refrigerators all his size. Instead of growing up in a giant's world, he would grow up in a child's world. Every day in the late afternoon, the children would come home for a few hours of dinner and playtime with their parents. That way, parents could spend at least 2 hours a day of concentrated family time together. I inquired into the possibility of photographing the children inside their little world, and I was warmly welcomed in by the ladies who were caring for and training each of them. Each of these children had their own story of what their grandparents and parents had been through to get to where they were now. The majority had come from Latvia. The boy on the left in this picture was the son of a Yemeni Jewish father. I know they were relieved to be in Israel. Many of their ancestors had been forced to flee a bit over 1900 years earlier. Now they were home. The children began young in the arts, sciences, and music. It was also amazing to see. Each of us volunteers was given a kibbutz family to be our own. We ate dinner with them once a week. This is Segev, my kibbutz brother. A few relics of past wars were used to remind the children that peace cannot be taken for granted. This is an anti-aircraft gun and a captured Egyptian tank. In the warm nights, the babies' cribs would be pushed out onto the sidewalk, and each of them covered with a mosquito net. As you walked by late at night, you would see 2 Israeli men walking slowly between the cribs, one carrying an Uzi and the other an M16 or a captured AK-47. They knew that the first place terrorists would come was for the children, and they had to be always ready. Thank you for watching, and pray for the peace of Jerusalem.